Oh, yeah.
Good afternoon and good morning. Thank you for joining us for this Christmas Eve National Press Rally, where we are refusing to believe the narrative that there is no room in the democracy for all. We have come across the country from West Virginia, all from Texas to DC, all throughout the country. We have impacted leaders, clergy members, representatives from Congress here coming together to say there is room in the democracy, and we're refusing to believe that there isn't. So with that being said, thank you members of the media for being here today. As you may know, that we have also launched an ad in West Virginia in the newspapers that says, West Virginia, Senator Manchin says there is no room in the democracy, but we refuse to accept that there is no room for the 35 million US households to receive life-saving child tax credits. We refuse to accept that it's impossible to raise wages for home health care workers. We refuse to accept that we cannot support 17 million low-wage workers with the earned income tax credit. We refuse to accept that there is no way to end the filibuster, no way to protect and expand voting rights for the 56 million voters that use the polls to access this past election. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our impacted speakers from West Virginia, from Charleston, West Virginia. We have Pam Garrison, Jean Evansmore, Alex Gallo, and Pastor Reverend Paul A. Dunn. Hear them now, live from West Virginia.
Reverend Cashmere, make sure that you let the media know who you are and that there will be media availability on this Zoom. They need to know, and then Pam will come.
Absolutely. I jumped right in. I am Reverend Casimir Brown. I serve as one of the co-leads for the National Faith Team for the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, and serve as the National Director for Religious Affairs for the repairs of the breach. Media, as you heard, there will be questions, time for questions and answers at the end of our program today, our press rally. Thank you. And the next voice you will hear is that of Pam Garrison from West Virginia.
Stand with us to end poverty and the suffering in this country. Senator Manchin, shame on you for you looking down your nose and calling us proud, hardworking, moral West Virginians. Your classism, racism, derogatory names, trying to make us less than human. We didn't create this poverty. This is a result of you and the Congress's failures for decades. We the people say there is room in the end for us. We refuse to accept that there is no room in this democracy for tens of millions of workers who are working hard for less than $15 an hour. Senator Manchin and the Congress, do your job. Do what we sent you for. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jean Evansmore, one of the tri-chairs of the West Virginia Poor People's Campaign, and I am one of the 352 plus thousands of seniors from the 2021 census. Yes, we need to have drugs that we can afford. Yes, we need to have teeth so that we can eat. Yes, we need hearing aids. And yes, we need healthcare workers who are paid well for what they need to do. Because they are the ones who will take care of us when we are unable to do it ourselves. Additionally, we refuse to accept that there is no room in this democracy for the 800,000 elderly and disabled people who are waiting to receive home health care. I'm on my way to get into that point where I'm going to be one of them, and I am not going to quit working for it. Senator Manchin, do your job.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for tuning in this afternoon. We refuse to accept that there is no room in this democracy for the 140 million people in this country who are poor or one economic emergency away from ruin. Maybe the reason that our knowledge of God is so limited is because we've been looking for God in places we consider nice and pretty. Instead, God chooses the ordinary and the messy. West Virginians have been raped and pillaged of our resources for way too long, and it's been done off the backs of hardworking people. It would be foolish to pretend that it is always easy to remember that if Mary had appeared in Bethlehem clothed, as St. John says, with the sun, a crown of 12 stars on her head, and the moon under her feet, then people would have fought to make room for her. But that was not God's way for her, nor is it Christ's way for himself. Now, when he is disguised under every type of humanity that treads the earth. But poor people and low-wage workers understand the basic message of Christmas. When the justice of God comes to those at the bottom of society, it is good news for all of us. If we lift from the bottom, everyone rises. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. When we lift from the bottom, everyone rises. Economists confirm this ancient wisdom as pragmatic insight. We do not have a scarcity of resources, but a scarcity of will to address inequality. We know that investment in people, in low-wage workers' pockets, helps the entire economy. Thank you so much for tuning in, and Senator Manchin, do better for West Virginians.
Would you make sure that they know all of that, who you are, where you're from, what part of it?
Thank you. I'm Alexandra Gallo. I live in Charleston, West Virginia.
Thank you.
Senator Manchin, I'm Pastor Paul A. Dunn of First Baptist Church, downtown Churchill in Charleston, West Virginia. Our motto here at this church is the house of hope in the heart of the city. And recently I preached a sermon entitled No Room for Jesus Crisis. And I argue that there is room for Jesus in this world. You have said there's no room in democracy for the stuff that we need. The stuff that we need right here in West Virginia, because when I look out the window, I see men's shelters. There's room for them. I see a covenant house, there's room for them. I see those living in poverty up under our freeways and right here in the steps of our church. There is room in this democracy for the things that you are voting against. We need you to rise up and be a leader. We need you to go to Washington, be at Washington, and vote for the stuff that's going to end the filibuster, give us voting rights, and bring us some relief with the Build Back Better. There's room, there's just not in your heart. We need you to open up your heart, bring health care, bring better things for people. West Virginia needs it, and we will not stop until we get the things that we need.
Yes, amen. Amen.
Thank you. We will now be hearing from Stuart Acuff, who is from West Virginia. Stuart.
Hi, thank you very much, Reverend. It's great to be here this morning. There is room, there must be room in this democracy for low-wage workers. There must be room in this democracy for single parents trying to raise kids on 2 jobs, and they don't see their kids at supper time, and maybe they see their kids at breakfast. There's room in this, there must be room in this democracy for every person of legal age to vote. That is fundamental to everything else. And West Virginians, like people all across this country, are calling for the absolute freedom to vote that so many people died for for so long in America. It's great to be here. There is room for democracy in this democracy. And finally, we need, as you can tell by looking at me, we need dental coverage and Medicare. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much, Stuart. Bishop Barber, we are now joined by Representative Pramila Jayapal.
Well, we want to welcome the Congresswoman, and you are hearing, Congresswoman, from the people that Senator Manchin says he's representing, but they're clear, they're not the people, because they know what the needs are here across West Virginia. We have others coming, but we wanted this morning to have you come on, because as chair of the Progressive Caucus, you've proven you're not about Democrat or about Republican, you're about deliverance, and you're about restoring the community, and you all have been fighting for what is good for all people. Talk to us about why we cannot allow what Senator Manchin did and others have done this week to end our fight, and why we have to continue. We have to continue. One of the things we say in the movement is we would have loved to have this in June. We would love for it to be done in July. We'd love for it to be done in November, September, the BBB and voting rights. But our deadline is victory. Our deadline is victory.
Amen.
Talk to us, Congresswoman, and we want to thank you from all over the nation for the stalwart leadership you are providing and proving that you can be a congressperson and care about all people, regardless of their race, their creed, their color, their sexuality, or their party. So, Congresswoman, all the way from Washington State, talk to us this morning, and the media and thousands who are online.
Reverend Barber, thank you so much for that introduction, but most of all, thank you for doing the organizing and for always being on the side of victory. That is exactly right. What you said is exactly right. If things that we are fighting for were easy, they would have been done yesterday. They would have been done a year ago. They would have been done 10 years ago. The things we are fighting for are not easy. They should be, but they're not. And so our task is to never, ever let go of the ability that we have as ordinary people to make change. And to all of you in West Virginia and the speakers that spoke before, you are absolutely crucial. Your voice is absolutely crucial. And this movement's voice, the Poor People's Campaign, and the voices of all the people across the country that are telling the truth about what change must be and what it looks like, your voices are absolutely crucial. Now, we are gathered on the night before Christmas for one simple reason. Working people, poor people, Black and brown people, families, seniors, immigrants, and women cannot wait. Lowering prescription drug prices and capping the cost of insulin can't wait as people ration their life-saving medication. Expanding healthcare for millions, expanding Medicaid to close coverage gaps, and expanding Medicare for seniors can't wait as the pandemic continues to rage. And housing can't wait as too many people don't have a roof over their head on Christmas Eve. Affordable, high-quality childcare and universal preschool can't wait as millions of people, and let's be real here, disproportionately women and folks of color are not able to return to the workforce. Home care can't wait. You heard the speaker before talk about elder care and the need to make sure that our wait lists get shorter, not longer, and to lift up the heroic workers who have been let down by poor conditions and unfair wages, and yet are still expected to look after us through this pandemic. And let's be clear that humane immigration reform can't wait as we continue to call immigrants essential, but we treat them as expendable. Climate action can't wait as we fight a deadly climate crisis that hits Black, brown, and poor communities the hardest. And we have in the Build Back Better Act and a Justice 40 provision that got incredible provisions in for environmental justice. And yes, expanding the child tax credit can't wait as families that we have lifted out of poverty with that child tax credit have used their last monthly payment on keeping the heat on, keeping the food on the table, or putting a warm coat under the tree for their kids. So I am asking for everybody to take heart in our vision. Never let go of our vision, because our fight for Build Back Better on Christmas Eve are because the popular policies that are within it are not only necessary, they are long overdue. And we are organizers. We do not give up. We never give up. Our strength and our courage comes in exactly these moments of crisis where everyone else may be saying it's done,
That's right.
it's not possible,
That's right.
but we are saying
That's right.
it is possible. Our job as organizers is to expand and push on the boundaries of what other people see as possible. Let's just be clear, the possible is not static. We
Congressman
create
Jayapal?
the possible.
You're
And that,
exactly
Reverend
right.
Barber, is what we've got to do now. And I am grateful to you for everything that you are doing and that the movement is doing.
Well, you know, that's exactly why we started with impacted person, because Manchin needs to know that the lie he told to you and to others has not depressed us. It is only intensified. And to the members of the media, I'm going to be at the end talking about what that intensification is going to look like and where we're headed. But we wanted you to be clear. And Congresswoman, we thank you so much because even what we've said, as you said, this is long overdue. Our economists that we'll be talking in a moment have talked about how we needed even more than even what was in the original piece. And that at least we ought to do this that's responsive as a major step in the right direction. But to not do it, and what Senator Manchin and others, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and others have done to block, is a form of classism and racism. You know, we talk about how it impact Black and brown people, but let us not also forget that of the 140 million poor and low wealth people, 66 million of them are white. And many of them are in places like Appalachia and in West Virginia. And so we must, as you said, never quit. We refuse to believe that there's no room in the end. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, and you stay focused and we're gonna keep fighting. Before Representative Barbara Lee comes on, we have two more impacted people. Danita Jones from Texas, I believe Danita Jones from Texas, and also Brother Bruce Grau from Wisconsin. And last time I saw Bruce Grau, he was outside in snow, standing with homeless brothers and sisters in Wisconsin. I mean, I want us to get the ugliness of blocking this, the ugliness of blocking something like Build Back Better, and the ugliness of blocking voting rights is just it's a form of human beings' inhumanity to other human beings. And so Danita and Bruce, would you come on now?
Thank you, Reverend Barber. I am Danita Jones, Tri-Chair of the Texas Poor People Campaign. And I relied on my faith to get me through the snowstorm that happened here in Texas, and during which time the 18 days that my children had no clean drinking water, sleeping fully clothed because there was no heat. The months without health care due to my loss of work from COVID closures, but I also rely on my faith to see. In Psalms 82, verses 3 and 4, it says, defend the weak and the fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed, rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. You, sir, Senator Manchin, and those like you are the wicked, and you are my oppressor. And as such, it is my duty as an impacted person to tell you, we refuse to accept that there is no room in this democracy for the Build Back Better agenda when the Senate passed a $778 billion war budget that is 4 times as expensive.
That's right.
We will continue to shout from every rooftop and every valley that there is room for democracy, and the well-dressed oppressors will not win. Thank you.
Thank you, Danita. And I think sometimes they actually think, Danita, that because COVID and we may not be able to organize as fully trying to protect people, but COVID not gonna be here always. And we're gonna organize every way we can. And when we can come back in the streets even more, we're gonna do that. We'll talk about that later. Brother Grau from Wisconsin.
Thank you, Reverend Barber. Yeah, this is why we need Build Back Better in Wisconsin. We've got a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. We're a right-to-work state. 1 in 10 people live in poverty. Last year, 17,000 kids were left out in the street. 70,000 households have children who do not eat during a week because their family just couldn't afford it. And 1 in 5 renting families are behind on their rent. Close to 2 million poor and low-income people lacked health insurance during COVID here. Now, the Build Back Better plan gives more cash and greater access to health care for our struggling families, significantly reducing the real threat of financial ruin by a $400 emergency or medical bill. Without it, thousands of families with children will swell the ranks of the already permanently homeless 4,000 who've been given no room, no food, nor political say in Wisconsin. We refuse to accept there's no room in this democracy for the 140 million people who are poor or one emergency away from economic ruin. Here we're meeting people, impacted people in the snow, who demand a democracy where there's no room for politicians who decide to fatten their corporate companions while denying food, shelter, healthcare, and life to people. Forward together.
Thank you, Brother Grau. Forward together, not one step back.
Step back.
And I hear the pain, but also the power in your voice. We were going to have Linnell Fall from Maryland, who's impacted, but she had this morning to go to the hospital with her son because poor, low-wealth people, things are always happening. There's always an emergency. And how shameful it is for a senator like Manchin to say we've done enough, and then to turn around and try to say he didn't want people in his state to get Build Back Better because they might use it. They were going to use it to buy opioids and go hunting. When the fact of the matter is the opioid epidemic is tied to poverty, people's lack of resources, lack of health care, and people many times it's just mean, and it's wrong. Now, we got a group, a union that's got people on the front line right now in the middle of Christmas, the SEIU, and Mary Kay Henry is on, and I want her to come and share with us in this press conference, the media, following her, the Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, and then we're going to be calling the rest of our names. Each who will do a minute and a half statement before we start the last statement, and then take questions from the media.
Bishop Barber, we also have online Representative Barbara Lee.
I'm sorry, Barbara. Lord, I forgot that. I apologize. Representative Lee, at this time.
Now, thank you very much, Bishop Barber, Reverend Theoharis, Reverend Brown, and all of our faith leaders, activists, and all of our people here in West Virginia with the Poor People's Campaign holding this rally, because your leadership, Bishop Barber, and all of you who have been impacted by such ruthless policies in our country, it's so important to hear your voices and for you to be the center of this movement for racial and economic justice. And also, I just want to thank Congresswoman Jayapal for her bold and strategic leadership. Now, you know, for me as a Christian, Christmas brings me a lot of hope, It reminds me that Jesus Christ, yes, was born homeless in a manger, but it also reminds me that his life was about fighting for the most vulnerable, fighting for justice, fighting for peace. And now, this means inclusion also in this moment in our democracy, which is very fragile. Every election, we see rampant voter suppression and efforts to undermine the electoral process, especially for communities of color, the elderly, students, individuals living in poverty, rural individuals, and many, many more. If they're coming for me, they're coming for you. We have to remember this. Now, we passed H.R. 4, the John Lewis Voting Right Advancement Act, and we must keep the pressure, and I know you're doing this, on the Senate to pass this crucial legislation and send it to the president's desk. It's time, mind you, it's time to explore, and I support ending the filibuster. Short of that, we've got to find specific carve-outs for voting rights. Too much is at stake. And let's be clear, we've got to find political resolve to address the interlocking systems of systemic racism, poverty, and ecological devastation. And Bishop Barber, this means, and I want to just remind us of H.Res. 438, the third Reconstruction Resolution, which will lift this nation from the bottom up. And so let me just say to all of you today, I am not accepting the fact that we're gonna ever give up. Yes, Senator Manchin's comments and what he's doing last Sunday in opposition to the Build Back Better Act were incredibly disappointing, but in no way are we giving up, because you know what? When we fight, and I know you know this, when we fight, we win. And so we're going to continue to fight side by side until justice rolls down like a mighty stream. So I want to just wish everyone Merry Christmas and thank you all for continuing to fight until justice is done.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman Lee, and for your continuous fighting. You know, you just mentioned about the voting pieces, as well as the poor people need it all. We need everything and more in the BBB, and we got to have voting rights. Otherwise, the corporations just overrun everybody. And the fact of the matter is, Manchin knows that. He's listening to his corporate backers. But you know, we have to think about how we won these rights. We didn't win these rights in the back room. We won these rights by creating a movement in the front room that gave people like you leverage in the back room. So we say to all other organizations that are out there, if you're just going in and meet with Manchin by himself and not putting pressure on him, then you're part of the problem as well. We've got to have pressure across the board from everybody. And we have to understand that this man has already done something that most people are missing. And that is, even if he were to agree to some carve out in January, he has held up passing voting rights until most of these states have already passed redistricting without pre-clearance reviews and these other laws. And so even if he does it later, it's not about celebrating, it's about him finally doing what ought to be done. Because right now, while you're with him in the back rooms and other places, we are watching the democracy. We're watching a rolling coup d'etat, a rolling insurrection going on in state houses. Mary Kay Henry from SEIU, then Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis from the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign and the director of Kairos.
Reverend Barber, Reverend Liz Theoharis, the 2 million members of SEIU and the millions more fighting for a $15 minimum wage and the right to join a union are proud to stand in love and solidarity with everyone today. And I want to specifically join my sister in West Virginia, Pam Garrison, who kicked us off by saying we refuse to accept there is no room for a $15 minimum wage for tens of millions of service and care workers. And specifically, we refuse to accept the $8 and $9 wages that are paid to our nation's 2 million home care workers and 2 million child care workers who are caring and doing the essential, valuable work of caring for children and people with disabilities and our seniors. We believe there is room for a historic investment in care jobs that are part of the Build Back Better proposal. And these jobs are done by a majority of Black, Brown, Asian Pacific Islander, immigrant, and Indigenous women of color, together with white women in every zip code in this nation. There is room for those jobs to be paid a living wage, to have 2 weeks of paid sick leave, to have affordable health care for the worker and their families, and a retirement with dignity. And these jobs become those jobs by the right to join together in a union, just like mine workers and auto workers of the last century. Women joining together in unions and care workers are going to transform these poverty jobs into the next most multiracial working class this nation's ever seen. There is room to build back better by making a historic investment in the care services, major progress on climate justice, essential protections for immigrants, and other key investments that our speakers are talking about today. There is room to ensure that all of us can vote freely and safely and participate fully in our democracy, no matter where we are from or the color of our skin. This Christmas, the members of SEIU stand in solidarity with everyone in the Poor People's Campaign in saying that it's the best gift that Congress can give us, and especially Senator Joe Manchin, is to pass both Build Back Better and voting rights as soon as possible in the new year. Forward together, not one step back.
Forward together, not one step back.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Senator Manchin is playing at Caesar, or at least King Herod, in today's Christmas story. He's saying there's no room in this democracy for the 140 million poor and low-income Americans. including the 700,000 West Virginians who have been locked into poverty and low wages under his watch. He's threatened by poor children that he wants to cut off or limit their lives and livelihoods just so that he can hold on to the power and wealth, making millions off of destroying the earth and enriching himself off the poor. And on Christmas Eve, doesn't this sound indeed like Herod? Just like a pregnant, unwed teenager, a homeless refugee who is to be the mother of the savior of the world, but is turned away by authorities who would hoard the wealth of the empire for themselves on Christmas Eve. Poor moms, their children are being turned away by the Herods, like Manchin of our day. But Senator Manchin, the US Congress, we have a message this Christmas Eve. It's Mary's song that the poor will be filled with good things and the rich will be pulled down from their thrones. As a preacher, as a biblical scholar, I know that truly this is the story of Christmas. A movement is being born in the forgotten mangers, the poor hoods and hollers of our nation. And although those in power, like Senator Manchin, are willing to murder children in order to protect their wealth and privilege, the voices of mothers are crying out. Voices from those in West Virginia and across this country refusing to be comforted. They're singing the song that Miss Yara Allen sings in our movement. Somebody's been hurting our people. It's gone on for far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Liz, for your prophetic voice. And to the members of the media, it is not hyperbole. 750 people die every day from poverty and low wealth before COVID. 250,000 people a year. And every time you block policies that would lift people out of poverty, you are participating in a form of government-sponsored murder. Shally Gupta-Bond is an economist, and she has other economists that want to speak to us this morning. They've sent a powerful statement in. Attorney Gupta-Bond.
Thank you, everybody. One of the arguments that we've heard from Senator Manchin and others to oppose the Build Back Better agenda is about inflation, claiming that the increase in prices we're seeing justifies pulling back on this critical government spending now. However, economists have also been clear that not only would there be a negligible, meaning a minimal inflationary impact in the years ahead from the Build Back Better Act, but it would actually reduce inflationary pressures and bring down costs for families. I wanted to share the statement from the labor market economist Heidi Shierholz, who's the president of the Economic Policy Institute, on why Senator Manchin and others are just wrong about inflation. She wrote, opportunists looking to block the Build Back Better Act say that the recent inflation we've been seeing is a market signal that we're trying to do too much to help the people of this country. That is not true. In fact, the cost of today's inflation will be exponentially higher if it continues to be weaponized by opponents of the Build Back Better Act and the broader Build Back Better agenda. Today's inflation is happening because of extreme but temporary economic distortions caused by two things. One, the pandemic, and two, decades of glaring underinvestment in the nation's physical and human infrastructure. She continues, that means that not passing the Build Back Better Act isn't the way to cut back against inflation. In fact, blocking Build Back Better would actually hurt this country and the people in it and waste a chance to ease inflationary pressures in the future. In fact, because Build Back Better directly aids families in some of their most burdensome costs, like childcare, elder care, and education, and it shores up the nation's physical infrastructure to ensure that economic shocks don't spark a repeat of today, it is crucial that we continue to focus relief and investment on these places where it is needed the most. And earlier this year, EPI estimated they could spend as much as $1 trillion per year for 10 years, and this would have moved the country in the right direction. She concludes the pandemic recovery was never going to be completely smooth, but going back to the status quo that did so much damage for so long is not an option. Rev Barber and everybody on this call, these are the experts we need to listen to on the economy. and Senator Manchin and others who are opposed to the Build Back Better plan, saying there is no room in our democracy for them to be held accountable to the immoral policies that have led to 140 million poor and low-income people in this country. We cannot accept their position, and neither will economists and other experts who know that moral policy that prioritizes and centers the poor is also good economics.
Thank you, Attorney and economist Gupta Barnes. And you know, it's amazing that the Republicans and Senator Manchin and them, whenever they talk against these policies, they say what they feel. They don't say, and the economists have said. They don't say, and the people that studied it, it's just, I have a feeling. Well, we really need you to have the right kind of feeling, and that's a feeling of heart for the people in your state and across this country, and do what is right, and stop lying to the people. Stop lying. Now we're going to have preachers from various denominations and groups who represent faith communities of tens of thousands, some of them hundreds of thousands, who are locking arms. And I want to ask each pastor or minister if they would say who they are, what particular denominational body they represent, and at this time they each will give their statement, starting with the Reverend Dr. Alvin O'Neill, following the Reverend Dr. Nancy Petty, the Reverend Jimmy Hawkins, the Reverend Dr. Beth Johnson, the Reverend William Lamar, the Reverend Lamar Bailey, and Johnson. And then we want to make sure, I think I missed it, so I apologize, but Father Justin Muncie, if he is on, and Reverend Freddie Haynes, Reverend Dr. Freddie Haynes, in that order.
Thank you, Bishop Barber. I come today as a native of the Mississippi Delta, an executive director of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington, June 18, 2022. Christmas contradictions. It does not seem pro-life to me that my native state would take its right to life case all the way to the Supreme Court, and at the same time choose not to adequately provide for children and families already here. 48% of the people in my state are poor or low wealth, but pro-life politicians consistently refuse to support a living wage for working people, loudly proclaiming we are standing for the dignity of life. Yet nearly 400,000 people in my state remain uninsured because political leaders refuse to expand Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. We're calling out today the hypocrisy of politicians who proclaim one thing but do another. We reject the narrative of Senator Joe Manchin and others like him that there's not room enough in the inn of our democracy. It's a Christmas contradiction. We refuse to accept that there's not room enough when there are still 4 million uninsured people who would qualify for Medicaid coverage under the Build Back Better agenda. There is room. There must be room. And we will not give up until room is made in this democracy for all the people.
Amen.
Right, that's right.
Barbara,
Dr. Petty?
thank you. Yes, thank you for all that you are doing. I am Reverend Dr. Nancy Petty, and I pastor the historic Pullen Memorial Baptist Church in Raleigh, North Carolina. This year, the Raleigh and Durham area in North Carolina, where I live, secured the #2 spot overall in U.S. News and World Report's latest edition of Best Places to Live in the U.S. And yet, as a local pastor, I get on average 20 to 25 calls a week from hardworking folks who can't afford to meet the cost of basic living, paying their rent, putting food on the table for their families, and getting the health care they need to stay healthy. So here's the truth, America. The #2 best place to live in the U.S. has a poverty rate of 13%. You can't be the best place, the second best place to live in America, and have a poverty rate of 13%. The question we should be asking ourselves is, do we want the award of being the best place to live in the U.S., or do we want the honor of being a community and a state where all people are treated equally? And this is the question that faces all states and communities across this nation. Do we simply want these fake awards of being the best places to live in America, or do we want to create communities
where all people are created and treated equally. When we refuse to accept that there is no room in this democracy for the 140 million people in this country who are poor or one emergency away from economic ruin, we sin against God who created each of us in the image of God, and we sin against America's fundamental and founding vision of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all. And finally, to my fellow Christians listening, be careful tonight of going into your warm churches and singing joy to the world, the Lord has come, if you're not willing to go out into the streets of America tomorrow and work for that justice and the joy of justice for all Americans. Be careful, my friends, of how you celebrate this evening.
My. Reverend Hawkins.
I'm the Reverend Jimmy R Hawkins, the Director of the Presbyterian Church USA, Washington Office of Public Witness and the Ministry at the United Nations. Voting is the cornerstone of our democracy and the fundamental right upon which all our civic liberties rest. And there is room in our democracy for strong voting rights and the Build Back Better bill. Passing comprehensive voting rights legislation must be the #1 priority of this administration and Congress. The Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act have already passed the House and need to be passed by the Senate. The voting rights of Black, Brown, Indigenous, immigrant, low income, LGBTQIA+, people with disabilities, and elderly and young voters are under attack in all areas of this country. With Georgia and Texas leading the way, politicians are engaged in voter suppression. There's over 30 anti-voting bills are designed to make registration unnecessarily difficult, to cut back on early voting, and put in place strict voter ID requirements. We speak in support of Build Back Better because there is room for all. We say to Senator Manchin, it is not too late. The vote hasn't been held, and there is still time for you to do the right thing. Vote for the people in West Virginia who need health care, higher wages, and daycare. Do that which you were sent to Congress to do, to rebuild the lives of people who need to be given a chance for a better life. There is room in the end of American democracy for strong voting rights and Build Back Better. If we believe in the message of Christmas, this is a time of supporting those in need of the gift of love this Christmas. Thank you.
Amen. The Reverend Dr. Beth Johnson.
Good to be with you today. I am the Reverend Dr. Beth Johnson, co-chair of the Unitarian Universalist Association Poor People's Campaign Leadership Council, representing over 1,000 congregations. I'm here to say, Joe Manchin, we refuse your narrative. We refuse to accept that there is no room in the democracy when there are 17 million low-wage workers who would have qualified for the expanded earned income tax credit. We refuse the contemptuous narrative that people do not deserve the funds to live with even a modicum of the wealth that you possess. Refuse the cynical view of people that says they cannot be trusted with even the barest necessary income. As a pastor, I know that I have to love the people. As a senator, you have to represent the people, not be an enemy to the people. Yet there seems to be no room in your heart, no room for poor people, no room for children. Make room, Joe Manchin. Open your heart, make room, or move over. And finally, we refuse to accept that there's no room in the democracy to protect the Apache sacred lands of Oak Flat.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Beth Johnson. Bishop, we have the last two, Reverend Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove and Reverend Dr. Freddie Haynes.
Thank you. And Bishop, before they come, I want to thank Sister Johnson for reminding us of Oak Flats, but also for being very clear. And Manchin needs to hear that as a love warning too. It would be better for him to just get out of the Senate than to keep on hurting poor people, because God is not pleased. Reverend Rev Jonathan Hartgrove, and then Rev Dr. Freddie Haynes.
Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove with the Red Letter Christians, a network of evangelicals around this country who believe in preaching Jesus and justice. And I'm glad to be with the Poor People's Campaign today to celebrate Christmas, because we all know the message of Christmas. The angels made the message of Christmas clear. Good tidings of joy for all people, not for some people, for all the people. That's the message of Christmas. But the story also makes clear that there's a choice at Christmas. Reverend Liz reminded us of the choice that King Herod made, decided to try to stamp out the hopes of poor and working people, decided to try to kill Jesus and to kill the hope and the promise of good tidings of great joy for all people. Often that has been the response of powerful people throughout the history of the world. And unfortunately, it's the response that Senator Manchin and others have had in this moment. But the story also tells us that there's another choice. The low-wage workers who were there that day were the shepherds in the field. And those low-wage workers decided to walk off the job, to head on and find the bearer of this good news. So today, the Poor People's Campaign has gathered low-wage workers around this country who are willing to stop things, to interrupt things in order to welcome this news. And so I'm here as somebody who celebrates Christmas to say to other people who celebrate Christmas, we got to decide which side we're on. Either we side with the Herods who say that things have to stay the way they are and that they're willing to kill the hope and promise, that there's no room for all of the things we've been talking about today in this democracy, or we side with those folks who say it's good news for all people. That means we got to stop what we've been doing. We got to interrupt things, and we have to go and worship the one who's called to bring a new way. That's the message of Christmas, and I'm grateful to be with the Poor People's Campaign to celebrate it today.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Dr. Haynes.
Thank you so much, Bishop Barber, for your prophetic witness and leadership. Reverend Liz Theoharis, what a gift you are. Reverend Casimir Brown, I salute and thank God for each and every one of you, because you are reminding us that really Christmas is not so much about what we get for Christmas, but what we get from Christmas. I'm Frederick Douglass Ames III, pastor of Friendship West Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas. I'm also serving as co-chair of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference of pastors and lay leaders who fight for social justice, and I'm co-chair of the Social Justice Commission for the Progressive National Baptist Convention. I think all of us know that the spirit of the Grinch has always tried to steal Christmas, just as an oppressive tax system combined with an indifferent innkeeper to render a family homeless because there was no room for them in the inn, just as the policies of Herod were death dealing for a generation of hurting families. The spirit of the Grinch now continues during this season with Senator Manchin and all who oppose voting rights and refuse to invest in human infrastructure so that we can rise from the rubble of COVID, which exposed an infection that has put our body politic in intensive care. That infection is one of economic exploitation, injustice, and indifference to poor people. I'm here in the state of Texas, the most difficult state in the union to vote prior to the voter suppression laws that passed these past special sessions. Texas ranks #1 in the nation for uninsured residents, number 47 for doctors per capita, and #1 for rural hospital closures. Texas is a big state, but sadly, the bigness of our state is reflected in the bigness of the pain, poverty, and heartbreak that exists during this Christmas season. And so given that, I think it's very important for all who are in power, who have the nerve to gather around a tree, may even show up at worship and worship the babe born homeless in Bethlehem, not to forget that that same baby grew up and announced the Spirit of the Lord was upon him to preach good news to the poor. That's policies that would impact poor people in a positive fashion, set the captives free, heal those who are broken, open the eyes of those who are blind, and then used his power in order to benefit those who suffered the most. As a matter of fact, when you think about it, Jesus in the wilderness is fasting and praying for 40 days. The devil says, turn these stones into hot water cornbread. He refuses to do so. And then 10 chapters later, the Bible says there were those who were food insecure in the wilderness, and Jesus uses his power to feed them. Senator Manchin, Republicans, those of you in power, recognize during this season that you are given power not to enhance your, not to enrich your pockets. You are given power not for self-aggrandizement, but you are given power in order to benefit those who are suffering, those who are hurting. And so during this season, we simply say to the Grinch, we say to the innkeeper, we say to Herod, in the words of hip hop culture, check this, we've got time today. We're going to keep on fighting. We've got time today, tomorrow. We've got time until justice is secured. We've got time until the right to vote for all is a reality. We've got time until everyone has access to health care. We've got time until every American who works is paid a living wage. We've got time until we bust the filibuster. We've got time until we show enough build back better. We've got time because check this, until there is liberty and justice for all, there is not liberty and justice at all. Please, Mr. Manchin, get rid of the spirit of the Grinch in your own spirit, because the spirit of the Grinch, like Herod, like the innkeeper, is always trying to steal Christmas. But you better know that we are not going to quit fighting, because we've got time today, tomorrow, and until justice is a reality in this nation.
Amen, amen, Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes. We've got time, and God has given us time, and we're going to take this time to change what needs to happen in time. It is, as Theoharis says, Kairos time. It's time to break into the middle of this. As we conclude today, I want to read a letter that's going out for the media to have. We'll be sending it out in just a moment, and we'll take questions. I want the media to know that these members, these religious leaders and impact people represent millions of people. Progressive Baptists, thousands of congregations. You use thousands of congregations. Presbyterian, thousands of congregations. Red Letter Christian, thousands. You know, I used to talk to Joe Manchin when I went to the Senate one time to speak, and I brought up Appalachia. He said he'd never been in a room where a black leader, he called a black leader, brought up caring about people in Appalachia. And I said, well, I'm sorry that you haven't had the fullness of the black experience, because my granddad was from Appalachia. And he gave me his cell number. He would text me back until I criticized him, until I challenged him. It's almost as though he likes to play games with people. I watched one day as he put his arm around Raphael Warnock, but he won't break the filibuster. He likes to play these public games. He talks real soft and talks real nice, tries to be cool and smooth. But in some ways, he's nothing more than a political policy assassin, paid to disrupt, distort, and to stop what would help all people. And so I'm writing to him, open letter, and this is my statement. So I'll take just a bit. Dear Joe Manchin, we are writing not only to you, but all those you have chosen to stand with in this season, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Senate Republicans, and so-called moderate Democrats that have not moved strong enough, hard enough, and fast enough for poor and low-wealth people across this country by obstructing the Build Back Better Act, living wage legislation, voting and immigrant rights protection. You have been downright abusive to poor and low wealth people in this country and in your state. Sadly, you have used your power to insist that there is no room in this democracy for the basic needs of everyday people. You have blocked investment in our daily lives and prevented legislation to secure the infrastructure of our democracy. We are writing today, we are having a press rally today to be clear. There is room in our democracy for all people. We are writing to tell you the truth. We are not going to stop fighting to expose what you and others are doing and who it is hurting. The fundamental question should have been from the beginning, not how much does it cost to do this, but how much does it cost in real lives not to? And in the new year, on January the 7th, one day after that, the horrible remembrance of the insurrection, we will continue to be a resurrection. We are committing to begin a new season of nonviolent intensification of multiple forms of direct action led by poor and low wealth people alongside religious leaders. Because 40 years of trickle-down economics have brought us to a place where 140 million Americans are poor and low wealth. 52 million children, 52%, of our children, and 43% of all adults, and over 73 million women, and 66 million poor and low wealth white people, and 26 million black, and over 68% of natives and Latinos. Over 32 million people in this country make less than $15 an hour, and you are blocking the things. Not just now, even when you block keeping $15 living wage in the American Rescue Plan. Those of you who insist that we cannot invest in everyday people and the infrastructure of our democracy, you have accepted this devastating reality as normal. And we would be crazy if we followed you down that rabbit hole. But it is not normal. It is abnormal. Senator Manchin, you have been the head of the pack of this abuse, claiming concerns about debt and inflation as justification, even as you supported an over $700 billion military budget. You never questioned nearly over $3 trillion given to corporations in less than 2 years. You've never challenged the federal investments that allow billionaires to make $2 trillion during this pandemic, while 8 million people fell into poverty. But even as economists say, we need actually 10 trillion, a trillion a year. President asked for 3.5 trillion over 10 years. You've blocked less than 2 trillion. The compromise that you and your colleagues promised to send to the president before Christmas, you did it in order to get a vote for infrastructure, so you lied. And many of us knew it, and we said you were lying. We are writing today because we know these actions are contrary to the Constitution's mandate to establish justice and to our deepest religious values to care for the least of these. Senator Manchin, I know somewhere in some of your colleagues' minds, you all say, well, they can't do but so much because of COVID, but COVID won't be here always. And that doesn't stop us from social media. That doesn't stop us from other forms of direct action. And it's not going to stop us from in the street. You have become a modern-day Scrooge. You've chosen to be aligned in some ways with the political abuse of what happened with Herod. You're abusing mine workers. You're abusing low-wealth people in your own state. You're abusing the women and the mothers I met up in Appalachia by stopping the Build Back Better Act and refusing to act with your colleagues to pass voting rights. You are abusing people, but know this, Senator Manchin. Our deadline was never December. Our deadline was, it should have been done long before now. So our deadline has always been when we win. Your modern-day interposition and nullification has only served to intensify and embolden our agitation. Just like the Dred Scott decision in 1857 only caused the abolitionists to get stronger, what you're doing is going to make us stronger. Because we don't have to tell people anymore. We don't have to try to persuade them. You have shown them with your own actions. Your position appears to be that there's no money, there's no policy and room in this democracy to invest in the uplift of working poor and low wealth people of this nation, but that is a lie. The majority of your constituents in this state know you're that line. That's why over 68% of them support voting rights and support the basics of the Build Back Better plan. And we are here today to say we will not accept the lie. You cannot tell us to itch or scratch where we're not itching. You cannot tell us that when you're doing something else to us that it's just rain falling on us. The game is up. You lied to John Lewis when you signed off on to be a co-sponsor for the 40 People's Act while he was living. Went to his funeral and lied. You lied to us when you met with us. We haven't forgotten. You didn't want cameras in there. Now we understand why. But you said you supported living wages. You had a plan to start at 11 and get past 15. And now you're lying about Build Back Better. So we can't stop fighting. We have to keep on because your lie that there's no room in that democracy cannot stand. There is room in our democracy and public policy to extend child tax credit to 6.1 million children and 35 million households. How can you stand against that? There is room to maintain and expand the earned income tax credit that would benefit 17 million low-income workers. There is room in this democracy to benefit 6 million 3 to 4-year-olds who would benefit from preschool. There is room for the 4 million additional people who are uninsured right now in the midst of COVID. You got free health care when you went to Congress. Just because you got elected. Somebody said you went to Congress, you didn't have but $100,000 in your pocket. And now you've got millions because you stood on the backs of your own people. There is room for the 18 million low-wage and essential workers to get 4 weeks of paid family leave. There is room to raise wages for home health care workers. There is room to ensure voting rights and stop voter suppression. To say there isn't enough, to say that we shouldn't spend on these priorities, shouldn't do these things, is to say that there's no room in our economy for the poor unless they stay poor. There's no room for the uninsured unless they stay uninsured. There's no room for the underpaid unless they stay underpaid. This political nightmare is as bad as Mary and Joseph being told there was no room when Jesus was born. We refuse it, Senator Manchin. And we will fight you every way, nonviolently, and mobilize and organize until we win. Senator Manchin, you're on the wrong side of God. You're on the wrong side of the people. And when you choose the Chamber of Commerce over the uplift of the people, I have a warning for you. What doth it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose your soul? We remind you the love of money is the root of all evil. We remind you once to every man and nation comes a moment to decide in the strife of truth or with falsehood for the good or the evil side. We remind you that Jesus said that those who hurt the poor and the least of these, they would be on the left side when judgment comes. And God's self would say, depart from me. But when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When I was a stranger, you didn't welcome me. We remind you what Jesus' brother said in James chapter 5. Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that's coming on you, because your wealth has rotted and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and your silver are corroded. And the people who you have stolen from, their cries have now come before the Lord. Mr. Manchin, our message to you is not partisan. It's love, justice, and truth. What you're doing is so wrong, so ugly, so unjust, so undemocratic, so ungodly, so sinful, that we pray for you to repent and turn away. And we'll push you with people until you do the right thing. Or if you don't want to do it, you do it because of the pressure. And I want to remind you of something lastly that Rabbi Heschel said to John Kennedy, a Democrat, a month before March on Washington. John Kennedy, in fact, won West Virginia. He said to him, because John Kennedy was slow on doing some things, we forfeit the right to worship God as long as we continue to humiliate the Negro. What Rabbi Heschel said then is true for you and your political enablers and the whole nation. We have to challenge you and fight what you are doing because we cannot forfeit our right to worship God. Since we don't worship you, we worship God. We have to stand with God, and God is always on the side of love and justice and mercy and caring for the least of these. But as a bishop in the church and a pastor, Mr. Manchin, I want you to know I don't hate you. I actually feel sorry for you. In fact, I'm afraid for you because your arms are too short to box with God. And the kind of karma that you unleash when you just use power to hurt folk is a fearful thing. I pray you will change. But know this, we will not stop until change comes. Members of the media, you can ask questions to anybody that's been on this press rally today.
We have Robert Henley with the salon. He asked his question first, and I will bring him on to talk. Hi, Robert.
Yeah.
Oh, unmute yourself again. Salon.
Hey, Brother Robert.
Okay. Very good.
Now.
Thank you. Greetings and thank you so much for having this very important call. There's no place else for a reporter to be today. If you could ask your subject matter experts to comment on the fact that we know that we're in a period of time where we have a tremendous labor shortage. This pandemic has caused people to ask profound questions about work, and it's caused people to have to uplift their families and take care of their families because work has been so dangerous. We've lost tens of thousands of essential workers. Could you talk about how Build Back Better has in it a little bit of a beginning to flip that very oppressive American tax pyramid, which for my entire adult life has taxed the labor, the sweat of our brow at a higher rate than idle capital? And could you talk about how, if we want to encourage women and other people to get back to work, we need to make it so that work can pay?
Exactly. I'm going to ask Attorney Shelley Gupta Barnes just in a second, but three things. One, you just said, if you want people to go back to work, you ought to pay them in a way that it's a living wage. The travesty is when you say somebody can stay off work and make more money than working, that's the problem. That in itself is the problem. It's not true what they're saying because that stuff is temporary and it doesn't account for how far people are behind. People were already hurting before COVID. COVID exposed the problem. COVID exposed the problem. And we spent a lot of time trying to hide the problem even in COVID because the people we call service workers before COVID, when COVID came, we needed them to go work, so we called them essential workers. People did. Something, you're essential because, but the poorest people and the hardest working people and the low wage people were the first people to have risks. The first people to get infected, the first people to get sick, first people to die were the people that we still are refusing to pay a basic living wage, even after they saved this country during COVID. We are existing today because we're standing on their deaths of all the people who went to work anyhow. And so you're exactly right. And in Build Back Better, we're changing this tax code in significant ways that should have been done 40 years ago. What we're experiencing is Manchin and others are trying to continue the trickle-down economics of Ronald Reagan that have gone on for 40 years that have gotten us to where we are with 32 million people making less than a living wage even before COVID hit. I also want you to know, when we talk about intensification, the members of the media, we put full-page ads in Washington, in the papers in West Virginia today. We are talking, we're gonna, starting on January the 7th, have a minimum of 50 clergy people and 50 impact people calling his office every day. And there's some things I can't say that we're planning on doing, but I want you to know, on the 6th, they will be talking about the insurrection. On the 7th, we will be the resurrection. Shelley Gupta Barnes.
Yes, thank you. So the Build Back Better Act does include, it is fully paid for, or much of it is paid for, and it does include the small surtax on mega millionaires, anyone with an income of $10 million or more, and billionaires that would raise hundreds of millions of dollars to pay for the cost of these vital investments, put those resources back into these programs and policies to expand economic security. And we know it's far past time to do that, to pay for these wealthy and CEOs and the financial sector to pay what they owe, both on their income and their wealth. This is a step in the right direction. It is not the whole, but it is moving us in that towards that goal, especially given the fact that their wealth has increased by what they've gained during the pandemic itself, over $2 trillion in less than 2 years, would cover the entire cost of the Build Back agenda over 10 years. And one thing I just want to stress is that we can't also be locked into the mentality that everything needs to be paid for upfront through these taxes. There is a good reason to tax everybody, or to tax these mega millionaires and the billionaires on this wealth that has been unduly gained, to set this economy right. And there are moral and economic reasons to make long-term investments in people who have been impacted by this pandemic and the years of trickle-down policies to turn the priorities of this nation in the right direction. We never ask these questions, as Rev Barber and others were saying, about the military budget. We don't ask these questions about tax cuts for the wealthy, but we always ask them for programs for the poor. It's a distortion of our national priorities that gets reflected in our national policies, and Build Back Better would begin to set these priorities right.
And as David Hamilton, economists, say, we must use the tax code has been used to create all this poverty. It's been used to create these disparities. We must use it to uncreate them, to change them, to transform them. And that's in fact, earned income tax credit and child tax credit. If you're not for that, even Ronald Reagan was for those things. So you really are, you're not a moderate if you're blocking that. In fact, there's no real such thing as a moderate. You are extreme and you're mean, and you must be in somebody's pocket if you can't at least the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit. Come on. And lastly, let's say it right. As Shelley said, the Build Back Better plan is a response. It's not even as transformative as it ought to be. So understand the Poor People's Campaign, we lean in with the Economic Policy Institute. We believe it ought to be that $1 trillion a year for 10 years to fully transform this economy. But even if you go with the Build Back Better plan, you're talking about $1.9 billion a year. That's less than 2% of the gross domestic product anyway. We never should have started talking about the cost first. We should have talked about the problem first, the need first, and the cost of not doing it. It's this investment that will have exponential impact on the economy. And if we don't do something, as you heard us say earlier, the problems that we have are going to get worse and not better. Next question.
Okay, if anybody else has any questions, please raise your hand. I will go ahead and select on you now. Ashley Billings, do you have a question with CNN? Let's see here. Ashley? Let's see here. Hers did not go through.
We're going to also, while you're doing that, my mic fell off. I'm sorry if you all hear it, but we're going to be sending this link out to all the media. You can review it again and again and again and again. Push it out. Feel free to use any of it. The people have given permission, those who have talked today.
Great.
Thank you, all the media that are on. Thank you for staying on. Is there anybody else?
No, that's it. That is it. The only other question we have is if the letter, which you answered, the letter will be made available.
It'll be made available in about 30 minutes. There's a couple of changes we need to make, and it'll go live out first through Twitter, and it'll go live later on this evening through the Action Network. But tens of thousands of people will be able to join in signing, and it'll be sent directly to Manchin and others. If there are no others, Dr. Allen is on. We didn't start our day with field music, but I think we ought to, since the angels sung on the first Christmas. We ought to sing some justice songs today. Make no mistake about all you have been on. This fight is far from over. There are some that tried to stop Jesus on the original Christmas, but our deadline is victory. Our deadline is lifting this cart from the bottom up to change the reality of poverty and low wealth in this country. our deadline. Everybody has a right to leave. We're willing to put our minds, our mouths, and even at times our bodies on the line in order to help this country do the right thing. Dara.
Thank you, Bishop Barber. Earlier, Reverend Liz mentioned the song, "Somebody's Hurting My Brother," and I think that we've been singing this song throughout, and every time we have had the opportunity to lift this song, it has always applied everywhere we lifted it, and so we lift it today. Because the truth is that somebody is hurting our people, and it has gone on far too long. And we have resolved that we will not be silent. Under any circumstances will we be silent anymore. Somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. I tell you, it's gone on. Oh, somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Don't you know somebody's hurting our families, and it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. I tell you, it's gone on. Oh, somebody's hurting our families, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Did you hear somebody's taking our health care, and it's gone on far too long? Yes, it's gone on. I tell you, it's gone on. Oh, somebody's taking our health care, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Well, if we've been just a little too quiet, you know it's gone on far too long. Yes, it's gone on far too long. I'll tell you, it's gone on. Oh, if we've been just a little too quiet, you know it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. And we won't be silent anymore. And we won't be silent anymore.